Has your year been as awkward as mine? I'm sure it has. 2020, in terms of music listening, has been terrible for me. Not so much because of the music, but by the fact that COVID has driven me to work at home. And I got my family here, and I got in this very same room where I'm talking to you now, I have my daughter doing schoolwork most of the time. So that factor alone has limited my ability to play music completely. It's not to say I haven't played, my hobby is sampling music and listening to music, so I've been trying to listen where I can, but yeah, this year has not been like any other year, so my listening has been fairly limited, and my ability to play vinyl has been even more restricted. But I went through, kind of what I've been playing most of this year. And it's a little bit disingenuous to say this is probably my ultimate 2020 list, because there's a lot of recordings that I just have not been able to digest. So for this year, I just kind of selected the 20 albums that I had been listening to most. They're in no particular order, running through a gamut of genres, because I'm kind of a musical whore. I mean, I like so many different styles and types. I mean, I do have my limitations like a lot of people do, but I do consider myself pretty varied, and I think that's going to be reflective of kind of my mood. I am more of a mood listener, so depending on the mood I'm in, that's what I'm going to play. So yeah, I don't know if you guys are the same way. I'd say probably the last 5 albums I'm going to show would be in my top 20, top 10 for the year for sure. There's a lot of albums that I wanted to include, but I just didn't get to it. But enough talking, you're here to see what I have to show, right? So all of these that I'm going to show, with the exception of this first one here, are out on Bandcamp. And you can go out to Bandcamp and do a more extensive listening. And I do recommend it, because I am including sound samples, of course, given the length of this video, because I want to give you a small snapshot. But it's not a complete snapshot. It's hard to tell or really gauge the sound of an album in a 10-second sound sample. And I didn't want to go too long, because yeah, YouTube has gotten all wonky with the copyright thing, and I didn't want to get this video blocked. But the first album I'm going to show is a classic blues rock album by the group called the Blues Pills. This is their album Holy Moly, and Ellen Larson is the lead singer of this band. It's kind of interesting, because I think they formed in the United States. They're all Swedish, but they're all cutting their albums in Sweden now. But this is just classic blues rock. I love Ellen Larson's voice. It's analogous to Beth Hart for me. This is a great album. You can't go wrong with it. So here's a sound sample.
I hold my head up high. I hold my head up high. I kiss my past goodbye. I'm on display. But one day my birdie, he's gonna fly away. Yeah.
Switching gears, I've been dabbling a little bit in the Vaporwave scene, but this is not a true Vaporwave album, although it does have elements, which I'm going to include a sound sample of one. But this is Saint Pepsi, who has been around since 2012, New York-based artist. He's done a lot of remixes, but this album again runs a gamut of styles. You got disco, you got funk, you got elements of Vaporwave. I just love the cover on this one. Vaporwave is all about the 80s, and you know, you got the classic 80s computers, and even the inner sleeve is pretty interesting. Anyway, here's a sound sample of this one. So, you know, when I talk about mood and, you know, given our current situation, I look back and it's reflective of my feelings for this year. And, you know, I either had really pensive stuff or really moody, aggro aggression. And, you know, it's interesting what you play and how it can reflect on, you know, how you're feeling. And the Idols definitely was expressive of how I felt at certain times during the year. This is their album Ultra Mono. Their last album was just phenomenal. In fact, I consider their last album a little bit better than this one, but you know, the cover just says it all. Yeah, they're a Bristol band, and you know, just that UK punk really comes out. There's a little more instrumentation with these guys, but it's definitely aggro and in your face. So, you know, if you're looking for a good punk listen this year, you can't go wrong with this guy. Here's a couple of clips from this one. So any year would not be complete without a little bit of metal, stoner rock, doom metal. And one of my favorites has been from the Swedish group Lowrider. Yeah, all the elements of stoner rock are there. And, you know, again, the cover really gives you a good feel for the vibe of the album. It gets spacey at times. You know, there's some unique instrumentation. There's a mellotron, there's an organ in certain pieces. And, you know, these guys have been around for maybe about 5 years. But this is another fantastic listen. Maybe I should stop using the word fantastic. But yeah, it's definitely up there for me if you're into stoner rock. Here you go. Going into another metal, stoner rock, heavy rock album is by the Italian group Black Elephant. This is their album Seven Swords. This is on a new heavy metal label that I just discovered this year, Small Stone Recordings, and I think they're based out of Germany. Yeah, this label is just fantastic, and you know, their sound, I mean, it isn't comprehensive of the label, but you know, if you like what I'm going to play from this group, then definitely check out the label. So I'm not the biggest country music fan. There are cases where I do dabble in it a little bit, and there is a alt country artist from Northern California which I discovered this year, Jess Williamson, the Sorceress. You know, I do like a good pedal steel guitar from time to time, and you know, that's pretty that's a common used instrument in country music, but you know, she mixes it with folk and psychedelia. And yeah, I was just mesmerized by her voice when I first heard this. And you know, upon first sample this year, this was a record that I bought almost immediately. Normally, I like to listen to songs 2 or 3 times, or you know, listen to a smattering of songs on the album before I make a purchase. But yeah, this is one of those ones. I heard one song and I was like, I gotta have this one. And so it was kind of a blind buy in that case. But she's been around for a few years, and this is on Mexican Summer. I do recommend it if you're into alt country. So here's a couple of cuts off this one.
To almost any room. Youth is wasted on not looking out that open door.
So, you know, I'm not covering any reissues or archival releases in my 20. I'm not covering any comps. I kind of wanted to focus on 2020 artists. You know, if folks are interested, I would be happy to talk audiophile releases, but I'm strictly speaking of music that was cut in 2020 this year. And in terms of this release, this is up there with any of the audiophile records that I purchased. I hate, you know, giving you analogs, but, you know, I want to give you a reference point for how this artist sounds. And, you know, if you're a fan of Florence and the Machine, Tara Naomi Doyle, it looks like Gnome, but it's pronounced Naomi, has a little bit of a Florence Welch vibe to her, but you know, in terms of her guitar playing on this album, it is just so three-dimensional. And the songs that she writes, this is Alchemy. Sorry, I should be saying the titles of these albums, but this is Alchemy, and she just happened to sign my copy down here at the bottom. Yeah, she pairs the songs together, and yes, it's about alchemy. She has a song about mercury, which is like liquid mercury, which is very interesting. But this was a very compelling lesson. I love putting this on just, you know, to hear how clear the recording is. It does come on gold wax. I'm not going to pull it out for you, but fantastic album.
Your mother's child, once we rid you of your Western rituals.
Hannah, the Omaha Introvert, you know, I know a lot of you know her here. She is the go-to person for shoegaze, and you know, we had been trading albums several times through the years, or through this year. And, you know, I'm very thankful because she did give me a couple of pieces that, you know, did make, you know, my 20 list for this year. And this was one of them. This is a band that's been around for a long time. And I just never bothered to investigate them. But she sent me this album, Ringo Death Star's latest, and I think it's self-titled. Classic shoegaze sound. And you know, I like the mix of the male and the female vocals. They're trading off on a couple of the songs, and yeah, if you're into shoegaze, this is definitely the album to get for this year. Shoegaze wise, you know, I had listened to a bunch, and this is probably my favorite shoegaze album for this year. This is a band I'm definitely going to delve a little more into their past history, you know, especially coming from Austin. I'm really curious, but thank you, Hannah, for gifting me this LP. prior to COVID really bogging things down here, I purchased this album in January, and this is Alexandra Savior, her Archer album. This is her sophomore release. Her first release was on Columbia, but this one is more of a self-release. It's on 30th Century Records. I actually prefer this to her Columbia album, which I did get through Vinyl Me Please, I think a year or two ago. This is very self-reflective, acoustic piano-based music. And, you know, I just like her and her songwriting ability. You know, if you're looking for a happy album, this is definitely not for you, because it is not happy, it is not poppy, it is very introspective. And, you know, when I picked this up in January, it was on non-stop rotation for several months, and I still play it now. This is an album I am definitely going to keep for a very long time.
My fate is at the hands of my saving grace. Come here to betray.
Next up is an album that is coming from an Iranian Dutch artist. It has a very trip-hop feel to it. She was new to me, and I think she's been around for a while. Interesting concept record, so to speak, and the cover is kind of reflective of the mood of the album. Again, you know, reflective of this year. This is Sevdaliza's Shabrang. Now, she uses drum machines to some effect, which I'm not a fan of drum machines. At least some of them are very soulless. But for whatever reason, I think it was her interesting vocal intonations that had me gravitate towards this album. This is on Music on Vinyl. Here's a couple of cuts off this one.
After all of that, how is it possible we're strangers again? Baby, I'll let the birds in.
Next up is an album off of Karma Chief, which is a division of Coal Mine Records, and I think a lot of people know Coal Mine for their funk and soul albums, and this is no different. This is done by the Ghost Funk Orchestra, which is a New York-based band, and you know, there is wonderful brass, female-led, 3 females, I think it is, doing the vocals here. I could be wrong. This is a new discovery for me this year. Pressed on Gotta Groove Records, which did a fantastic job. In fact, they did the wonderful MoFi style sleeves here. And yeah, it's too bad they don't put anything in the dead wax, because, you know, in terms of pressing quality, this is just fantastic. But the music is great too, and I've been playing this quite a bit. So in terms of funk and soul, this is definitely up there in terms of 2020 releases.
Never knew they took you for. Never knew they took you for.
So I bought several jazz albums this year, and there were a couple of ones that really stuck out to me. And one of the first ones was one that I had pre-ordered in 2019, and this is Chip Wickham's Blue to Red. And I'm going to be honest, I've never been a big fan of the flute as an instrument. I struggled with it for the longest time, but I don't know, maybe, age has changed me, so I'm getting more into flute recordings a little bit, and Chip Wickham is a flautist or flutist. He is based out of Spain. I think he's originally from the UK. Extremely prolific. I mean, he's dropping, at least an album a year, which is just fantastic. And I think he has a goal to write as much as he possibly can. But just, classic straight ahead jazz with a flute. If that's your thing, definitely check this one out. This was a limited red or blue variant. I think they had a red variant too, but wonderful album on Love Monk. One of my favorite musicians from this decade, especially since I got into the VC, is Greg Fote. And Greg Fote, like Chip Wickham, who I just showed, is extremely prolific. He's dropped 2 albums this year. This one was my favorite, which is Symphonie Pacifique. This features Moses Boyd on drums. Moses Boyd dropped the album Dark Matter, which was also a fantastic release, which I also picked up this year. But this, if you're not familiar with Greg Fote, he is an organist / pianist. He's also a composer. He's big into library music, so he's a connoisseur of it. But this is just a wonderful jazz record that is a gamut of jazz styles. And so if you're into organ and piano, and just the gamut of musicians, so you can see all the players on the album. This one I can't recommend enough. This would definitely be in my top 10, as it were, even though I'm still digesting music from 2020. Switching gears completely, I like dance, EDM type music, and this is a group from Ghent, Belgium. This is Rheinzand, and this is coming out of the Music for Dreams label out of Denmark. This has some elements of a classic disco vibe, but there's some strings to it. It's such a fascinating listen, and the vocalist here, Charlotte, her voice is just fantastic. Now, what's interesting, Reinhard van Bergen is a classical violinist and wonderful composer in his own right. So you go from neoclassical to doing this kind of EDM disco record. I have 3 of his classical works on order as I speak, but he also plays the guitar. Just a fantastic musician. Here's Rheinzand for you. Now, I've been a fan of Thievery Corporation since almost their inception. They're Washington, D.C. based, and one half of Thievery Corporation is Eric Hilton. And Eric I don't know if it's because of the times. He dropped 2 records this year. This is the first. This is Infinite Everywhere. This is, how do I describe it? It has elements of trip hop, elements of world. It's mostly instrumental, and you know, if you like Theory Corporation, it's you know, it's almost an identical vibe. It's not far off from that. Here's a couple of tracks off this one. Okay, the next one, if you're a fan of 90s grunge, indie rock, this album would fit right in that mold. This is one that I don't have on vinyl quite yet. Hannah gave me this gift as a CD. This is Drew Citron's Free Now album, and she wrote this over a period of 6 months based on a breakup. So she's originally New York based, but she went back to California. But I just really like that, you know, despite the heartbreak, we got this wonderful piece of art out of it. Drew is a member of Public Practice, who also came out with a wonderful album this year, and some of the players that are on this are the same that are on this one. So here you go.
I can't be your animal no more.
A couple years ago, I discovered the artist Skin Shape, and he also was very prolific. He came out with a Afrobeat record this year, which for me, it's definitely in my upper tier. I've been playing this nonstop, and this is a departure from his previous album, which was very eclectic. It had jazz, it had soul, funk. It was kind of all over the place. But this, I wouldn't have expected him to come up with an Afrobeat record. This is Umoja, and I got this limited edition screen print of 40 pieces. He also came out with a blues album like 2 weeks ago, which I ordered, and you know, I downloaded it. I haven't had a time to digest it yet, but this one is just a fantastic Afrobeat. So if you like Afrobeat, you gotta pick up this record.
Olha pro céu e veja suas luzes brilhando.
This next one is soul, funk, instrumental, little bit of hip hop, and there's not much known about the artist. Now, Digital Gramaphone also had this on his top 20, and it's nice to watch these lists to see what you have in common with other people, and also learn about new records that you might have missed. But it was cool to see him show this record, and he'd been searching for more information, and I had been searching for more information. It's produced by Inflow, and the band is intentionally trying to, you know, not do any press junkets or anything like that, so there's nothing known about them. They released 2 incredible albums last year, 5 and 7, and they released 2 albums this year. This is Untitled, Black Is, and at the end of November, they released the album Rise. And you know, the albums are just hard to find. Like Rise is already sold out. I was lucky to get this copy of this one, and this you know, you can tell is inspired by Black Lives Matter, the movement. In terms of the soul pieces, they are definitely going to be up there in terms of their meaning and their content. And this was featured on NPR, and it is definitely worthy of all the hype it is getting. I'm hoping that I can get a copy of Rise. But yeah, go out to Bandcamp and give this one a sample. It is just an incredible album.
It's a hard life, fighting to be seen. It's a hard life. We will live in the desert under the stairs. There are monsters amongst us, monsters. There are monsters.
So this band is a new discovery for me this year, and this one has been probably my most played album for sure. Post-punk band out of Dublin, Ireland. It's been on a number of top 10 lists already. Some people think their previous record was better, but I'm not familiar with it. But you know, you shouldn't be surprised. It's the Fontaines DC, A Hero's Death. I like the drums, the bass, the simple chord structure, the post-punk attitude and vibe of this band. I like the fact that, you know, they intonate in Irish. I mean, I hate the fact that, you know, it's like you hear so many artists, we gotta sound American. But no, this is, you know, it's no holds barred. It is driving. It is wonderful.
Make the women feel young. I heard I'm serving as a soldier. That's a televised mind. That's a televised mind. That's a televised mind.
I saw the cover of this album initially and I totally dismissed it. If I show you the cover now, you're gonna write it off. It's almost like blatantly sexual. And I wrote it off. I'm like, whatever. I thought it was like some girl singing about hip hop. But when I saw it on a critics list and how they described it, and the whole writing process, I became intrigued. So I'm like, okay, I'll give it a sample, and I'm happy I did. So the album was written over the course of 6 months, where the artist, you know, was trying to find her inspiration, and the album is about rebirth. The cover was, I think it was a shot off of her video, so it is Phoenix by Earth Eater. Yeah, don't let the cover distract you, but you know, when you see the video How to Fight, you'll understand what she was going for. So she locked herself away. She got violinist, a cellist, a harpist. This is I don't want to say avant-garde, but it is ambient in places. This is definitely a concept album, and you have to listen to it all the way through. It is just an interesting listen. You know, trying to figure out the meanings of some of her lyrics, but you know, again, it has such a interesting vibe. It's so compelling. It's sort of like a you know, a David Lynch film where you're trying to find the other meaning behind some of it. And you know, I am just thankful we got this wonderful piece of art this year. She is just such a fascinating artist. Yeah, so definitely don't write the cover off. Here's a couple of samples. I don't know if it's going to do it justice, But yeah, I'm curious to hear what your impressions of this are going to be. I don't know how I'm going to feel about this album a year from now, but it is just such an interesting piece of art.
It's still under the surface. That my stride has been followed.
So that was my top 20. Was it crap? Let me know. Yeah, especially after the last one, because I don't know how people will react to it. But I am curious to know what other people's top 20 are. I would say when we get out of this COVID situation, my feelings on things will probably change. But I am curious. What do you guys think? Shoot me a comment down below, and thank you for watching.